Thank you. Sound check. Good morning. 大家好，欢迎你来，谢谢你来。That's about all the Mandarin I will use. I was in a small group with a friend on Zoom during COVID, and she was saying, "It's cute when you speak Mandarin." I'm no longer cute. I'm 57 years old. I came to the U.S. when I was 8 and grew up here in the Washington, D.C. area, now fondly known as the DMV. So it's a great joy, honor, and humbling to be invited to open this conference with a personal sharing and some of the things God has taught me regarding faith and mental health. I want to thank Chinese Bible Church of Maryland for hosting this event. Thank you, Pastor Hugo, and thank you, Tim, for launching this conference in record-setting time, under a month, since it was conceived, the idea was conceived and launched and pulled together. And I want to thank everyone for being here. It's so great to see many faces. And I want to acknowledge my family being here, my mom, Wei and Rosa in purple. She's part of this elders group here at CBCM. It's been a great church home. And thank you for being a good family for her in her final season. And my youngest brother, Deep, is also here. So thank you both for being here and growing up with me. And then my other brother, DC and Carol, they're part of this church family as well. So some of you know them. And I have a baby niece who's 20 months old. We call her Cece. She also goes by Arissa. We got to have family dinner tonight. But my brother DC is out for ski training, so he couldn't be here in person, but he'll be watching on demand. So thank you, Angelo, for recording this session, the keynotes. So I titled my talk, Comfort for the Uncomfortableness of Mental Health. And it's an uncomfortable subject because it's uncomfortable because we don't talk about it. It's hard to understand. It's something that's filled and covered with shame and stigma. And I hope through my personal experiences, my own mental health journey, and some things I've learned for my own self-care and the healthcare systems that are in place, that we can learn to be a little more comfortable about the subject, but also know where we can receive comfort from God, who is our comforter. Now, on September 7th, just over a month ago, I attended a faith and mental health conference here in Washington, D.C. at the HHS, Health and Human Services. And the theme was the urgency of now. And at the conference, it was mostly African Americans, a smattering of other non-Black people. And it just resonated deeply within me that this is so true. Not just for all of us around the world, not just for Americans, but especially for those of us that are Asian Americans and Chinese Americans. And so the time is now, the time is today, and I'm so grateful for the Christian Ed Department and the church here for launching this conference. And my hope and prayer is that this will be first of many. And there are not many around the country, so it's not just absent here in the DC area. It's absent in America, it's absent in the world, but yet the need is urgent, the urgency is now. Now, so here's our challenge today. This mental health topic is very uncomfortable to talk about, but we have to talk about it. And that's how we begin to understand and be comfortable with it. Now, who am I to kick off this conference? I'm just me. I don't have a lot of degrees behind my name. I did graduate from Virginia Tech with electrical engineering back in 1988. So that was pre-internet, pre-email. And then I do have a Master of Theology from Dallas Theological Seminary. And that's it. That's as far as I want to go in formal education. I'm not a very big school person, but I am eager to learn. And in contrast to Tim, I don't like to fix things. I actually like to explore and invent things. So that's another aspect of engineering, so that counts. Well, life started for me in a traditional Chinese family. My dad was from Fujian. My mom was from Zhejiang. They met in Taiwan and married. And we came to the U.S. when I was 8 years old. My second brother was 6, and my youngest brother was 1. And our Asian American life started here in Bethesda, Maryland. My parents took the hard road of downward mobility, going from math teachers to working in a restaurant and then a motel business, and going from fluent Mandarin language, where life was comfortable and easy, to an uncomfortable life of broken English and navigating the culture shock of American life. It was a hard life, but they sacrificed for the 3 sons to have a better life and more opportunities. Now, my faith journey started in Winchester, Virginia, small town of 20,000 at the time. And our family ran a small motel business. I went to middle school and high school there. And God used ordinary people to change my life. A used car salesman stopped by our little motel, invited us children to go to Sunday school, and that's where the seed of God's word was planted into my heart. A truck driver staying at our motel shared the gospel with me and my second brother and my dad before he left and invited us to pray. And I look back at that occasion as the start of my faith journey. But I didn't really know how to grow on my own, so it took a little time. I was a late bloomer. And I think looking back and having more life experiences, I realized my faith journey started because I wanted more out of life, and I wanted to see what was that abundant life that Jesus promised. I realized early that I wanted more than a predictable Asian American life. Get a college degree, get a job, get a house, get a wife, get some kids, and rinse and repeat. There had to be more to life, I thought to myself, and Jesus has turned my life into a huge adventure, a huge faith adventure. And since the topic du jour is mental health, I had no clue what that was growing up. Our family didn't talk about feelings or emotions, and I didn't hear much about it at school. Did you? As long as we were surviving, we had food, we had clothes, we were provided for. I was doing pretty good at school. Life was good, and we should be thankful. And it wasn't that I was not thankful, but my default emotion was a lot of sadness and a lot of fear. I was a very timid boy, and there are still many moments when I'm timid as an adult. I was afraid of many things growing up when I was little. I'll name some of them, and they all happen to start with the letter S. I was afraid of strangers. So the childhood stories I heard about me growing up, I don't remember them because they're perhaps too painful to remember, but I'm told by my family and family friends that people would interact with me when I was little, and I would just stare back and be die. I would freeze. I didn't know how to respond, and the family friends would say, well, what's wrong with hi? That was my Chinese nickname. I was afraid of the swing. Something moving unpredictably, and I could fall and hurt myself. I don't remember that, but I was told I was afraid of the swing. I can get on the swing now, but when I was little, I did not ride the swing. I'm not real good at small talk, still not. I often draw a blank and I don't know what to say. And so I don't want to say anything wrong. I don't want to offend anybody, so I just stay quiet. And then some people say, oh, why are you so quiet? Well, I don't know what to say. And then, again, I freeze up. Skyscrapers. I'm not afraid of looking at skyscrapers, but standing on top of them or being at the Empire State Building is very anxiety-provoking. Swimming. We didn't go swimming a lot. We were a simple family working hard day and night. I was a latchkey kid. We had a family business to run. And there's good reason to be afraid of water because you could drown. Situations. I was afraid of situations, unfamiliar and uncomfortable ones, as many of us naturally would be. That's how we're built. We have a stress responder, super fast designed in our brains to be, they call it the stress response, fight or flight, when we notice something that might be a threat or might be uncomfortable. So the two most popular ones, fight or flight. I have a third one, freeze. So that's my preference one. One of my relatives calls it, the shutdown mode, when DJs go into shutdown. But that's my natural response, and I've had to find faith to move through fear rather than just being stuck. School. Now, I got good grades in high school, especially in math, and I went to Virginia Tech, like I mentioned. But in some classes, I didn't do so well. So one of the most vivid memories I had was in 6th grade in social studies. And I brought home a C-. And I was weeping and wailing and crying and inconsolable for days because I got a C- in class. I thought to myself, with all this shame and overwhelming emotion, what's going to happen to me? I broke my streak of straight A's. My life is doomed. And I was just feeling so bad for myself. Speaking. They say that public speaking is the number one fear that many people have. It's very popular. And my memory there was in 6th grade, high school debate class. I had to prepare a little 5-minute talk. And I got up with my index cards. I went through it. Every word was a struggle to get out. My mouth was dry. I was sweating profusely. I don't know what I said. I can't remember what happened. I didn't know what the audience reaction was. And I think I finished in 3 minutes. Was so filled with anxiety, I just sat down, froze, and the day eventually went, and that memory was over. Shame. Every mistake, every that I utter when I'm speaking, even today, I'm very sensitive to the mistakes I make or the things I have failed to do that would also count as a mistake. And I freeze when I don't know what to order on the menu at the restaurant. The twinge of shame pierces my soul every moment of my imperfection. It's like kryptonite to Superman. And it reminds me time and again I'm unworthy and not enough and imperfect, that I'm tiny, that I don't know how much my life matters. And it's easy. It is so easy for me to beat myself up for all my shortcomings, and I've had lots of practice with that. Recently, I read a book titled Soul of Shame by Dr. Kurt Thompson, who happens to be on the Virginia side of the DMV. And it's helped me realize it's not just my oversensitivity, although I have that. His expertise as a Christian psychiatrist in neuroscience, interpersonal neurobiology, explained how the evil one is masterful in using this tool of shame in his covert operation, constantly lurking in the shadows to accuse us of not being enough, of every mistake, and how we're displeasing to God. So don't let shame be the accuser, let God be the affirmer and advocate. Now allow me to fast forward and click the fast forward button. I've come to learn that living with years of my own unprocessed emotions, that leads to a breaking point. And that will practically happen to anyone with unprocessed emotions. And that breaking point can look different for different people. It could look like survival, settling for mere existence, living but not really living, being mundane, lacking passion, just getting through life. And to avoid the boredom or to numb the pain, many just turn to the screen, flip through channels, whether that's TV shows or movies or music, gaming or social media. We have so many distractions at our disposal to keep us numb, but God created us for more. Then there are those that turn to addictions or abuse, turning to the worst, substance abuse, because hurt people, and hurting people have to soothe their pain. And they turn to something that will just distract them from the trauma so they don't have to deal with it, or they don't know how to deal with it. And they're too proud to ask for help. They're too shameful to ask for help. Another option, they break down or burn out. Break down or burn out. Our body, our brain, our mind was not created for today's information age. We call it cognitive fatigue. The cognitive effort our brain has to do 40 hours plus a week. It wasn't made for that. We have hands and feet, we have muscles that we're created with to use, but because of today's requirement, many of us have to use our brain, not just at full capacity, but to overload. Our brain is designed to be energy efficient. It's constantly looking for ways to look for shortcuts, to be quote unquote lazy, to be routinized, and to be habitual. And I looked up some math. Our body is built with over 600 muscles, and yet we're using one to overload. The Bible said God created us for good works, not just with our brains, but with our hands and feet, prepared in advance for each and every one of us. But there's a better option. There's a better option, which is health and healing. By God's grace, some of us have experienced God's comfort and healing for our emotions. Now, this healing process involves diligence, divine intervention, healthcare professionals, and much, much more. Healthy processing of our emotions is essential for living well and having a better quality of life. Now, briefly, let me explain what healthy processing of emotion means. Emotions have to be expressed, not suppressed. In our Asian cultures, we have a concept of chuku. We eat our bitterness. We bite the bullet in English, they say. In Korean, they have the concept of han. We Asian people with thousands of years of history, we've suffered a lot, so we know how to suffer. Asian people know how to survive because we've had to survive all kinds of adversities. And then coming to America, the Asian American experience is traumatic, to quote a professor from Fuller Seminary. But keeping those emotions in our body unprocessed is harmful and damaging because our body keeps the score. And it's going to come out sideways. It's going to come out in unhealthy ways if we don't allow it to be expressed in healthy ways. Now, you don't have to share emotions with everybody, but you do have to share it with somebody. And as one author has rightly noted, spiritual growth is impossible without emotional growth. So now, out of the 4 paths that I've mentioned, there are more. And I think we can agree that healing is what we want for ourselves, for our friends, our families, and our neighbors. Now, my first breaking point came in the year of 2000, in the fall. What an appropriate time. That's when the bottom fell out for me. And due to a bad miscommunication on my part, I resigned from pastoring, and I had invested 10 years of my life trying to be a pastor. 5 years in seminary, 5 years pastoring, and I was left with this haunting and daunting question. Well, what is that all about? I was so overwhelmed with depression, I couldn't function, and I had to get help. At the age of 34, with all of that unprocessed emotion, because I was going through life with duty and responsibility as a good oldest son, but that was no longer enough. All that sadness and unprocessed emotion had simmered and boiled over, and I had resisted ever seeing a counselor because of the shame and stigma, but now I had to. The psychiatrist diagnosed me with bipolar disorder and helped me get back to health over the next few years. Now, the good news today at this conference is a big mark of progress for all of us to help each other experience the hope and healing we have in Christ. So let's open our eyes together and open Scripture to see how we can respond to faith in this growing crisis. Now, the fact of life is this. All of us experience various levels of stress, anxiety, depression, anger, and grief, and many other emotions. And how we manage these emotions are vital to our mental health and emotional well-being. So we all need to learn how to take care of our emotional health and mental health. Mental health is not just the disorders that are listed in the DSM-5 diagnostic manual. That's what the professionals use in psychology and psychiatry. Mental health refers to our very real reactions and responses to everyday life and situations in the real world. Now, when we experience life's challenges, I say, and I hope you would agree, that we can use all the help we can get from practical resources, from one another, from God, from healthcare professionals. Life is hard, but God is good. So let me answer some frequently asked questions about mental health. How do we know that God cares about mental health? Cast all your cares on him because he cares for you. So we're going to look at some words. We want to ground our conversation about mental health in God's word, real life experiences, and expertise today. That's from 1 Peter 5:7. And for those of you that want to make sure you don't miss everything, I have a full manuscript I'll make available to you when you contact me on the QR code at the end of the slides. Okay. Next one. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. God not only cares for your spiritual well-being, he cares about your physical body. He also cares for that inner part of your emotion, feelings, and your soul and your spirit. That's hopeful. That's a good word. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. God cares about every single aspect of our lives, physical, spiritual, visible, invisible, tangible, intangible. He cares for our whole life and what we experience in wellness and wholeness. And the word is shalom in the Old Testament, a picture of wholeness for one and all. And it is easier to be comfortable with our evidence-based part of our lives, the physical things that we can see, the things that we can measure with instruments, and the things that we can prove empirically. But there's a whole part of our human being and our existence that's invisible and intangible. And for those of us as people of faith, so vital to our meaning in life. God created our brains to both think and to feel. We have a left brain that's better at logic and ideas, and then we have a right brain that's better at feeling and creativity. Now, I'm oversimplifying something that's very complicated, and there might be some brain experts here in the room, but both parts of the brain do so much, and I just wanted to highlight that both of these are essential to mental health. Now, when mental health challenges come, and they will come, God personally takes an interest. All of us know that this world has suffering. In the real life, that's not the whole picture. The atheists say that with all this suffering in the world, and we're in the midst of a time we see in the news every day, so much suffering in the world. So if there's an all-powerful, all-loving God, why doesn't he just take it away? The Buddha teaches that life is suffering, so just accept it with mindfulness and detachment from the world. But God, in the person of Jesus Christ, does better. He knows there's trouble and suffering in this world, but he doesn't leave us alone. He gives us hope, comfort, and strength. Here's what he says. Jesus says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another comforter. Yes, a comforter, and he will abide with you forever. From John 14:6. And the Greek word there for comforter is parakletos. It means that God is alongside of us, right next to us, calling out to God for us and calling back the memory, the truth of God's love and hope when we tend to forget. And Romans 8:26-27 explains how the Spirit of God helps us. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. God cares for all of us in every kind of suffering, including and especially mental health. Because for those of us who have gone through that suffering, or perhaps even in the midst of it, we just don't know how to pray. But thank God, in his Spirit, he intercedes for us. He prays for us constantly, regularly, at our very point of need. Another question: what are the causes of mental illness? Why? How could this happen to so-and-so? Well, experts have found many, many factors that contribute to mental health problems, including physiology, biology, brain chemistry, genetics, family history, developmental anomalies, trauma, abuse, racialization, socialization, spirituality, and so on. But there are times when we just don't know, because we live in a fallen world where nothing is perfect. And I heard one pastor say it, we're all born with birth defects. Some are more acceptable than others, within the range of normal. But for some of us, we need extra help medically, relationally, lifestyle, whatever else. Some have stigma. Some are relegated as a disability. Now, there's a passage in John 9. I'll just read it through, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. As he went along, this is Jesus, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. And as the story of the blind man shows, we don't have to know the causes or reasons to know that God cares, that he comforts, and that he gives strength, and that he can heal. From scriptures and from life experience, we know that he can heal instantly or slowly, maybe on earth, and definitely in heaven. All for his glory and for our good, because God loves us and wants to bless us. And this story relates to mental health, if I may make an application, in two ways. One, being born with mental health challenges is not a sin. Number two, if God can use mud to heal blindness, God can use psychology and psychiatry to bring healing to mental health. And I'm sure there's many other applications. Now, while God's hope and healing is available to all, there are some unique challenges and distinct challenges in our Asian American communities that I want to mention to us as we learn about our context and our opportunity to encourage Asian American mental health. Asian Americans have a 17.3% overall lifetime rate of any psychiatric disorder and a 9.2% 12-month rate. This isn't too different than the non-Asian population, so we Asians are basically just as human as everybody else. However, Asian Americans are the least likely ethnic racial group to seek help from mental health professionals. Asians are 3 times less likely than Caucasians, for example. And there are perhaps many reasons for this, including personal and cultural shame and stigma, as well as lack of availability, accessibility, and affordability. By lack of availability, that means there's not enough professionals to serve all the needs. For example, when I needed to find a new psychiatrist to manage my medication, I was on a wait list for 2 to 3 months. Many Asian American counselors, in addition, are not taking new clients. By accessibility, we refer to language access. Asian Americans number over 34 ethnicities, over 50 languages, and perhaps many more. One study showed there's over 2,000 Asian languages and dialects in Asia. And there's a lot of need for healthcare professionals with language proficiencies. And when it comes to mental health, terminology doesn't translate. Language doesn't just translate on Google. So having racially aware, culturally competent healthcare professionals is lacking. And lack of affordability means it's just too expensive. Many health insurances don't cover mental health care or behavioral health, as they call it. Although there's some legislation looking to change that, but that's going to take some time to catch up. Insurance premiums are very expensive. I'm a freelance consultant by day, and so I have to pay for my insurance out of pocket. I have to pay for medication and therapy out of pocket, and that's just cost of staying healthy. And many people don't have the health benefits from an employer full time. Another reason is the lack of race-conscious, culturally competent therapy. I mentioned that briefly earlier, and there's a Netflix TV series called Beef. Parental warning, it's not family friendly. But one of the characters said, Western therapy doesn't work on Eastern minds. There's a lot of truth to that, and conversation for another day, another time. And personally, I've worked with both Asian and non-Asian counselors, and both have been helpful. But I will say talking with an Asian American counselor is so much easier because I don't have to pay for the meter that's running to explain myself and my family and my heritage backgrounds. So I can just get to the issues and really find ways of reframing and healing. That's so helpful. There are also increased mental health challenges because of COVID with anti-Asian hate and the loneliness epidemic. 49% of Asian Americans have reported facing discrimination. Over 11,000 hate acts have been reported to the Stop AAPI Hate Reporting Center. And even though Asian Americans are more group-oriented, we can feel very alone when it comes to mental health. The physical, quoting the U.S. Surgeon General, who issued a advisory about the loneliness epidemic back in May. The physical health consequences of poor or insufficient connections include a 29% increase in the risk of heart disease. Okay, so these are quantified issues related to mental health and loneliness if we don't take care of it. 32% increase risk with stroke and 50% increase of dementia in older adults. And lacking social connections increase the risk of premature death by more than 60%. Now, what is even more tragic, especially for Asian Americans, is the alarming rate of suicide among Asian Americans young and old. Asian American young adults ages 15 to 24 are the only racial group with suicide as their leading cause of death. Asian American elderly women have the highest suicide rate out of all women over 65. Asians in economically developed Asian countries like South Korea, Japan, China, Hong Kong have alarming suicide rates. It's a known public health crisis, but because of the social stigma, the underdevelopment of psychology, and other matters have made it very difficult for addressing the mental health issues. And in the Chinese language, one researcher has identified 113 terms related to shame. So many of us that are here that are Chinese, we live in a culture very steeped with shame. And that's more terms than the Eskimos have for snow. The painful reality. But though mental health is a very big challenge, we have a faith in a bigger God. And while it's been challenging for me privately and quietly for over 10 years, I lived with bipolar disorder quietly and privately. Others have also noted that managing mental health is not just a diagnosis, it's also having to carry the burden of stigma. And there's a saying in the recovery community that you're only as sick as your secrets. Now, on February 1st, 2017, I had another breaking point, a mental health crisis. I was hospitalized for 3 days for behaving strangely, and I never thought that would happen in my life. It took 9 months to recover and get a sense of normalcy again, and every day was a struggle to do just normal things. I did what I could to get out of bed and eat something and take a walk every day. I couldn't read or pray or think. I memorized Psalm 23 in the Lord's Prayer and recited that over and over when I could. And one mantra that helped me through was that I'm not alone, there is help, and there is hope. And God's grace was manifest in my church home that did talk about mental health. I attended a depression support group, a small group that deeply cared for me and prayed for me and met me where I was at. I had a therapist that believed in me more than I believed in myself, believing that I would recover and get better when I was ready to quit. I thought I would just be a hired hand working at a fast food restaurant. And there's not anything wrong with that, but it was very sobering and humbling. And after finding a different mix of medication that worked for my recovery, making lifestyle changes, I now sleep 9 hours a night plus an afternoon nap. I learned to better take care of my body and what it needed to stay healthy. And I'm so grateful God restored my brokenness I'm thankful for every moment and every breath. And through that humbling and sobering season, I recognized my vulnerability and mortality also brought me more clarity. And so I don't keep my bipolar disorder a secret burden that I carry alone. Every time I share my mental health journey, I've noticed that God uses it to open doors of ministry. So I made a promise to God that I would always say yes when I'm invited to share about my lived experience with mental health. And that's why I'm here today. 3 ways. So as we wrap up, I want to share with you 3 ways to grow in our capacity to care for mental health and to be a little more comfortable with the subject. First, let us grow in compassion. The Bible says in Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burden, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. And you know the parable of the Good Samaritan. I'm not going to read through it today. But the priest and the Levites walked by the injured, and perhaps for legitimate reasons. They had a schedule to keep. They had to get on time. But by contrast, compassion moved the Good Samaritan toward the person in need, the one that was robbed and left half dead. He put bandages on the wounds, took him to a place of safety to rest and to heal. What we want to take to heart is that compassion moves us towards someone closer to them, not away from them. And when it comes to mental health, when we find out someone struggling with mental health, we might have a relative, a distant relative, or someone in the church community. When you hear of that, do you move closer? And do you care? Now, I know instinctively we prefer not to get into messy situations. We don't want to get involved when we don't have the expertise or answer. And there's a cultural background that influences all of us because we grew up with culture. But what would Jesus do? Okay, we're not Jesus, so let's rephrase the question. What would Jesus want us to do? So let me offer a few suggestions. Care by being present. It's called the ministry of presence. Your presence is the best present and a gift. Notice in Job 3:13, Job's friends, when Job was suffering. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. Oh, those friends of Jesus, they were so helpful by caring, by being present, and being quiet. But when they started talking, it just got worse and downhill. So to put this into practice, the greater the suffering, the fewer the words. Okay, we can care by listening with empathy. No judgment and no, you should do this or you should be that. How often we've heard the phrase, you shouldn't feel that way. But feelings are just feelings. They need to be attended to, not judged. They just need to be listened to and then reflected upon. What can we do with that feeling? When people have mental health struggles, they need care and support. It's much more helpful to validate and affirm that their feeling is real, even when it may not be the full truth or the actual reality. The emotion itself is a real indicator of what's going on inside a person's heart and mind. It might be their perception. It needs to be listened to, and it's part of that emotional processing. Now, sometimes there are people, I won't name any names, but they like to give advice and be helpful, thinking that's helpful. But it's not, unless it's asked for, so refrain from giving advice. Another helpful tip, when you do want to offer words of hope, don't be trite, like quoting a Bible verse that everything's going to work out or other people have it worse. Focus on the affirmations of God's word, like God loves you, God cares for you, I love you, and I'm here for you. Okay. Care for people in need with practical help. Like the Good Samaritan I mentioned earlier, when the needs are obvious and you're able to help, just go in and help. It's a good idea to ask for permission just to make sure, but help where you can. 1 Kings 9 tells us about the prophet Elijah. After a spiritual victory, felt totally depressed and even had suicidal ideation. What did God do? He did not lecture at him. He did not remind him of the victory. Instead, God sent an angel to care for him, fed him with food, gave him water, soothed him to rest. And then after Elijah was restored, God whispered to Elijah with encouragement and renewed purpose. Second, let us grow in comprehension. There's a lot to learn about mental health. I know 23 years ago when I was first diagnosed, there were only a few books. I didn't know how to bring my faith and spirituality into my mental health journey. So I did the best I could with psychiatry and psychology. I still see a therapist twice a month, and I still stay on my medication for good behavior, and it's been helpful. For us normal folks, we don't have to learn as much as getting a degree to be a clinician, but it is helpful to learn at conferences like this. And at this time, 2023, conferences like this are very few and far between in Asian and non-Asian contexts. But they are so needed. The urgency is now. The powerful combination of faith and mental health is just beginning to be explored in the clinical world and in the church world. And we can bring the two together. We have a very powerful combination. And I know for those of us that work for a living, it's challenging to attend a conference like this if it were held during the week when it's not work related. And it's super important for you to be here today. So thank you for making time out of your busy schedule. Thank you, CBCM, for making space and hosting this event. And as much as I love to connect with people by phone or video, because I just love connecting, I also know the distinct value of being together physically. Because when we learn together physically in person, it's an immersive experience. And the people in this room right now, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. We will not gather like this with the people here today. And so I hope as you walk away from this conference, you learn some things, you build some new relationships, you see some familiar faces where you can have some follow-up conversations as you digest and experience how this plays out in your life, and that you could call upon each other, whether you're part of this community or other ones here in the DMV. And experiences. Here's why experiences like this are so important. Experiences, not just education, but experiences are what shape and reshape our brain and our minds. When it comes to mental health, we need that growth and shaping. It's what the experts, the neuroscientists, call neuroplasticity. So even if you're 65 and retired, you can still learn. And the best way for your brain to stay healthy is to keep learning new experiences, not just rehearsing the same old experience with crosswords and Sudoku. Plasticity refers to the capacity to be shaped, molded, and altered. And your brain is still pliable regardless of your age. It's not just the textbook learning, it's the learning through experiences. So that's why it's important to be here. And there are some valuable education and training resources like books, biblical teaching, blogs, webinars, and videos. There's a website called mentalhealth.bible. There's a screenshot of the homepage. And there's many resources available there. Like I mentioned, books, teachings, blogs, webinars, and videos, and podcasts. And then there's 5 really valuable books Again, I'll send you the titles when you send me a request on QR on the last slide. Grace for the Afflicted, a really nice, integrated, comprehensive approach on mental illness from a clinical and biblical perspective. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, The Anxiety Opportunity, written by Curtis Chang. Amy Lee, here in the red, on the third row to my right, your left. Curtis is her brother. Excellent book, love it. Very practical, very useful. Comes with a small group study guide. Very useful. The Garden Within and Who You Are is a brand new book by Judy Cha. Now, in 2018, the Erasing Shame podcast was launched by me with the help of a Korean American therapist named Eunice. And the podcast now has over 150 episodes. There it is. You can grab a postcard on the way out, and there's a QR code at the bottom so you can subscribe and you can contact me. And we created this podcast with a very simple premise. Since shame is so prevalent in some Asian cultures, and Brene Brown, popular author, says shame festers in silence, then the opposite of that would be honest and healthy conversations. And one of the amazing random stories I happened to come across was in Orlando when I was there at a meeting of Asian American ministry leaders. And we were going around sharing our intros and backstories. And I mentioned I host the Erasing Shame podcast. A 62-year-old Korean American adoptee lit up and said, "Oh, I listened to that podcast, and it's been so healing." The little encouragements along the way, even though it's a 100% voluntary effort, I have no budget, no staff, we've gotten to hear how it's been helpful to others. And I'm especially grateful to have found my season 7 co-host, Victoria Chang. You'll be hearing from her later today, Pastor Hugo's daughter. So I'll be running tech. She'll be taking the lead. And thank you for taking a huge step of faith to on this faith journey with me. And this shows how we can get more comfortable talking about mental health by having practice, sharing our stories, being open and honest with our personal stories from our lives, as well as from our scriptures. And we'll hear more speakers this afternoon, this day, throughout the rest of the day. And finally, let us grow in community. I was so encouraged when I heard about CBCM launching the Blessed Center, and that it included a mental health service. And it's going to be such a valuable resource for the people inside this church as well as those outside the community. And the comfort of God through his word and through his people is what we, as the church, the people, the followers of Christ, can offer for mental health that the world of psychology and psychiatry alone does not. And I think 2 Corinthians 1, verses 3-7 says it the best. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. For just as we shared abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ. If we are distressed, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which produces in you patient endurance of the same sufferings we suffer. And our hope is for you is firm, because we know that just as you share in our suffering, so also you share in our comfort. And notice how God's comfort is for us together in community, not just for one of us, though that is true. God comforts us in a special way when we are in community together. And community happens when we come together every week for worship, every time we have fellowship in small groups, cell groups, Bible studies, and support groups. One of my realizations as I started into this faith journey of helping Asian American mental health is that the church is the only place that gathers more Asian Americans every week than any other organization or social entity. Dr. Thomas Insel, after he retired from being the director of the National Institute of Mental Health here in the DC area, authored his reflections in a book titled Healing. And he shared that while there are many effective treatments for mental illness, including medication and psychological intervention, he stressed that we need a model that also includes recovery, not just treatment. And he described that recovery for people that struggle with mental illness, long-term recovery involves 3 P's: people, place, and purpose. And for me, as a person of faith, when I heard that, I said, oh, that's the church. Oh, would our churches be that place for people to experience care and support and purpose? But sadly, many of our churches are not yet known for that. But we can step out in faith being known for that. And thank you, CBSCM, for stepping out in faith and becoming known as a place that cares about Asian American and mental health. Because it is the greatest felt need that we have. Yes, there are people that need food, people that need shelter, people that need other practical things, and churches are great at providing for needs for that. But mental health is that one thing that is so challenging. And there's not enough resources in our society, and the church can step in with very practical helps, as I've shared today. The hope, the healing, the community, the support, and just being there for people. So the opportunity is now. Mental health is, to quote Dr. Matthew Stanford, the book I mentioned first in that list of 5 books, mental health is the greatest mission field in the 21st century. And I know this church is very committed to missions, so it's not an opportunity just for the Washington, D.C. area, not just for America. It is a great opportunity for the world. So, dear God, please open our minds and hearts today as we hear from many speakers, as we hear from you. Help us to be moved with compassion. Open our doors to the hurting, the broken, so that we can share the love of God, His comfort, His hope, and healing. In Christ's name I pray. Amen. And that's the QR code. You can contact me. Happy to share my manuscript, my slides, answer questions along the way, and stay in touch with you. Thank you.